Rhaenyra just won the Iron Throne. No sword fight, no dragon battle. Her brothers simply weren't in the room. And that's already a problem, because the version of this story George R.R. Martin wrote is not the version HBO is telling anymore. Episode 3 of House of the Dragon Season 3 quietly rewrote 5 major pieces of established lore, and every single one of them changes what happens next. Today we're going through each one, comparing it to Fire and Blood page by page, and figuring out where this show is actually headed. Because at this point, even Martin himself doesn't seem thrilled about it. Let's start with what didn't change. Rhaenyra takes King's Landing and almost immediately finds out the treasury is empty. That part is straight out of the books. Fire and Blood is very clear that her biggest obstacle as queen was never a rival army. It was money. The Greens had already scattered the crown's gold before she arrived, and nobody left behind knows where it went. So far, faithful adaptation. But the man responsible for hiding that gold is where things start to unravel. In the books, Tyland Lannister is one of the most important characters in the second half of the war. He's the one who scattered the treasury, and the one who convinced the Triarchy's fleet to join the fight at the Battle of the Gullet. All of that still happens in the show. What doesn't happen in the books is what comes next. Tyland personally sailing into that battle alongside Admiral Shirako Lohar and getting thrown into the sea by his own ally. Corlys Velaryon says it outright in this episode. Presumed dead. And if the show means that literally, this is a massive departure, because in Fire and Blood, Tyland survives. He gets captured, tortured, mutilated by Rhaenyra's people, and years later becomes Hand of the King under her son, Aegon III. Cut Tyland here, and you cut an entire political arc that was supposed to shape the next generation of Targaryen rule. Now, we never actually see a body. Heavy Lannister armor in open water is not a survivable combination, but this show has faked us out before. Worth keeping an eye on. This next one might be the biggest change in the whole season, and it's easy to miss because it happens in one throwaway line. Demon reports that Baela found Sunfyre's body, calling it, quote, long dead and decaying. In the books, Sunfyre survives the injuries from Rook's Rest. Criston Cole's men nurse him back to health, and he eventually flies again. That detail matters enormously, because in Fire and Blood, it's Sunfyre who Aegon uses to kill Rhaenyra at the end of the war, burning her body so completely there's nothing left to bury. If Sunfyre is actually dead in this version, that ending cannot happen the way Martin wrote it, which means the show either needs a new way to end Rhaenyra's reign, or Aegon needs a new dragon. And there's actually a candidate sitting right there in the lore, a wild, half-feral dragon living on Dragonstone called the Cannibal, known in the books for eating other dragons' remains. If the writers want a darker, more unstable mount for Aegon's final act, that dragon is already on the board. We don't know yet if that's the plan, but the door is wide open, and the show closed the old one itself. Here's a smaller change with a much bigger emotional cost. Hugh Hammer barely exists as a person in Fire and Blood. He's a name attached to a dragon and a betrayal. The show gave him a wife, cat, and a life worth protecting. In this episode, he asks Rhaenyra to bring his family to safety, and she agrees once she gets the city sorted. The problem is what the books say happens next. Hugh eventually turns on Rhaenyra at the Battle of Tumbleton, using his dragon Vermithor to burn the town to the ground. Martin never explains why, but if the show keeps Hugh's family living in that exact town when he does it, his betrayal stops being a mystery and starts being a tragedy with a body count that includes people he loves. That's either a devastating twist or a plot thread the writers still have to pay off before things go that far. Not every change here is dark. This one's actually clever writing. With the rat catchers all executed last season, the Red Keep is infested. Rhaenyra turns that into political leverage. She invites the hoarding nobles of King's Landing to a banquet, serves them rat, and announces their homes are being searched so their stockpiled food can go to the starving city. None of that is in the books. In Fire and Blood, Rhaenyra does try to win over the common people, but her solution is taxation, and that tax is part of what eventually turns the population against her. This new scene gives her one genuine, sympathetic moment of good governance before things fall apart, which honestly makes her eventual decline hit harder, because now we've seen her actually try to do this right. Last one. Corlys Velaryon has spent 2 seasons defending Rhaenyra's children, knowing full well they aren't biologically his. Now that his own bastard sons, Adam and Alan, could be legitimized the same way, Rhaenyra refuses. Her reasoning is political. She can't afford more scrutiny on questions of legitimacy with her own heir on the line. But it's still a betrayal of a man who backed her when it cost him everything. This exact conflict doesn't exist in Fire and Blood. What does exist is a slow breakdown in trust between Rhaenyra and Corlys later on, tied to Hugh Hammer and Ulf White's betrayal. So the show hasn't invented a new outcome here. It's just moved the timeline up and given us a clearer reason for the fracture. So why does this show keep doing this? George R.R. Martin has been public about his frustration. He's written about it directly, warning fans about what he called larger and more toxic butterflies coming in seasons 3 and 4. In a later interview, he described his relationship with showrunner Ryan Condal in one word: abysmal. But here's the counterpoint worth sitting with. Fire and Blood isn't written like a normal novel. It's framed as an in-world history text, complete with unreliable narrators and secondhand accounts. That structure gives the show room to diverge without technically breaking anything, because who's to say the historians got it right in the first place? And it's arguably working. This season has kept longtime book readers guessing in a way the earlier seasons never did. Most notably in the premiere, where scripted near-miss made everyone briefly believe Jacaerys might survive the Battle of the Gullet, right up until canon reasserted itself. Even the fake Daeron plot in this very episode, swapping in a lookalike to protect the real prince, mirrors a fan theory about a completely different character from Martin's other book series, one Martin himself hasn't even resolved yet. The show got there first. Ratings for Season 3 are down slightly compared to Season 2, but nowhere near disaster territory, and critically this might be the strongest run of episodes the show has produced. Episode 3 in particular is being called one of the best in the series, largely because it lets Rhaenyra's psychological unraveling breathe in a way Game of Thrones never gave Daenerys. Whether you're on Team Book Purist or Team Let the Show Cook, one thing is true. House of the Dragon just spent one episode quietly rewriting who lives, who dies, and how this war actually ends. And with a full season plus a confirmed final season still ahead, the gap between Fire and Blood and what we're watching on screen is only going to get wider. If you want a full breakdown of every change detail with sources, drop a comment and I'll pin the deep dive. Subscribe if you want the next episode covered the same way, the moment it airs.